E whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, it makes no sense and is a sad and hurtful system. Applicants for emergency spots in MIQ believe the process is broken. New figures show less than 10% of requests are approved in some categories, according to an advocacy group. The Serious Fraud Office confirms it's investigating alleged abuse of the wage subsidy scheme. COVID restrictions force people to say "I do" to downsized weddings. And is the end in sight for thousands of Canterbury quake victims allegedly shortchanged by Southern Response? Hawke's Bay cyclists are left deflated after someone tries to spike their ride. And crank up the Greensleeves volume. Dunedin, Mr Whippy is back in the house, or the van.
RNZ News, it's 5 o'clock. I'm Marama Tipole. The emergency allocation system for MIQ is being criticised for demanding unrealistic levels of evidence and approving very few cases. According to documents released under the Official Information Act, fewer than 10% of applications were approved in some categories, principally related to medical treatment or caring for family. The group Grounded Kiwis advocates for New Zealanders trying to navigate MIQ and is taking legal action over the system. Spokesperson Martin Newell says over July and August, 772 applications were approved, despite 1,500 rooms being put aside for emergency allocation. During that time, there were 3,500 applications. You can hear more on the story on Checkpoint shortly. There are 65 new community cases of COVID-19 today. All are in Auckland. Andrew McRae reports.
34 of the cases are epidemiologically linked, 31 are yet to be. 10 cases are household contacts. One new case has been identified in managed isolation, a person from Russia who arrived on Wednesday. There are 34 cases in hospital, with 6 patients in either ICU or a high dependency unit. The Ministry of Health says just under 4 million tests have been processed to date and slightly more than 6 million vaccine doses administered. Traces of COVID-19 have been detected twice in Te Awamutu's wastewater this week. The virus was also detected in a composite wastewater sample collected from Wellsford on Tuesday.
Laboratory workers throughout the country believe they're not getting the recognition they deserve as they plough through daily COVID-19 testing. Labs are doing between 30 and 40,000 COVID tests a day, on top of about 200,000 regular diagnostic tests. The president of the Institute of Medical Laboratory Science, Terry Taylor, says criticism from a small number of people about the competency of lab scientists is unfair.
It does come as a bit of a kick in the pants when we get people telling us we should be doing this or should be doing it that way, and often there's very little backing for what they're saying.
Terry Taylor says lab technicians are working very long hours to turn around COVID results. The Nurses Organisation has settled their long-running pay dispute with the district health boards. Negotiations lasted 15 months, but 83% of the union's 32,000 members voted yes to accept the latest offer. The union's lead advocate, David Waite, says the agreement addresses pay issues and makes important progress towards safe staffing. Most of the pay rises come from down payments on the pay equity settlement, a process due to be completed by the end of November. But Mr Waite says early lump sum payments are also substantial. The Minister of Health, Andrew Little, has welcomed the agreement, which is backdated to August last year and runs until next October. A homicide investigation has been launched after a person was found dead at a house in Omar, Peri in Northland. The police say they were called to the scene just before lunchtime. Another person who was at the house has been taken into custody. No charges have been laid at this stage, but the police aren't looking for anyone else. The US Congressional Committee investigating the Capitol Hill riots in January says it's pursuing criminal charges against Donald Trump's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon. Mr. Bannon failed to testify to the committee today, ignoring a summons. The panel will vote next week on whether to charge him with contempt. It's 4 minutes past 5. The New Zealand boxer David Nika isn't counting on coming home before next year's Commonwealth Games as he heads off to take up a big opportunity in the UK. The Tokyo Olympic bronze medalist and two-time Commonwealth Games gold medalist will fight on the undercard of Joseph Parker's December rematch with Derek Chisora in Manchester. Nika will train alongside Parker at the Morecambe base of British champion Tyson Fury. While he hasn't secured a place in managed isolation, Nika says he's comfortable knowing he may not be home before the Birmingham Games.
I'm kind of a leaf floating around in the wind a little bit. I'm kind of hoping that, MIQ disappears. If I have to, I'll stay over there until Birmingham. But yeah, fingers crossed I get to come home. But if I don't, it's not the end of the world. And I think I'll likely be spending quite a bit of time overseas over the next few years. So probably best that I get used to that.
Goalkeeper Lily Alfeed is the first player signing of the new Wellington Phoenix A-League women's squad. Alfeed has spent last season with Perth Glory, starting all 12 matches and making a league-leading 53 saves. Meanwhile, the Phoenix men's team is still to confirm their departure date for the A-League. The side had planned to leave in 2 weeks, but quarantine rules are still being determined. Coach Ufuk Tale says they'd hope to avoid MIQ.
We've done quarantine so many times, even though the environment is where we're still able to train, I still don't want to do that, and I don't want to put the players through that again.
Ufuk Tale says they intend to base themselves at Chatswood in North Sydney. And New Zealand golfer Ryan Fox is tied for fourth, 3 shots off the lead heading into tonight's second round of the European Tour's Andalusia Masters in Spain. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, the woman who has explored what she calls the 8th continent, the forest canopy, a safe pain medication made from algae. Artist Lisa Rehana plays favourites, and how Julia Child weans the United States off Jell-O salads. Call Kim Hillaho. Join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And taking the look at our weather forecasts up to midnight Saturday, Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Gisborne. Mainly fine, a few showers this afternoon and evening about the ranges of Bay of Plenty and Gisborne. Becoming cloudy in Northland tomorrow evening with a few late showers. From Waikato to Kapiti, including the central high country, cloudy and isolated showers about the higher ground, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Hawke's Bay, Wairakapa Upper and Wellington, fine weather. Bulla and Western mainly fine, but morning and evening cloud with a few showers in Westland. For Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine, apart from areas of morning and evening cloud for southern Canterbury. Otago and Southland, partly cloudy. Light showers in the east and about Stewart Island this evening. Clearing tomorrow morning. For Fiordland, a few showers. And for the Chatham Islands, fine spells. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi marama, tēnā koutou katoa no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The emergency allocation system for MIQ spots is being described as hurtful and illogical, with fewer than 10% of applications being approved in some categories, according to numbers released under the Official Information Act. 350 managed isolation rooms are set aside each fortnight for critical travel, where the person's unlikely to get an MIQ spot in time through the lottery system. Categories include travelling for medical treatment, to care for the terminally ill, look after a child, or because of the death of close family. But advocacy group Grounded Kiwis says figures it's obtained suggest the rooms are being underused. More on the numbers later, but first the people affected. Kiwi citizen James Skirpe had to go to the United States in a hurry.
Well, my stepfather called me around 2:45 in the morning, quite hysterical, to tell me that my mother had died in a car crash. He couldn't talk for too long, and he said he'd get back to me. And I hung up. I called my biological father, who lives in Williston, North Dakota, and my mom lived in Parker, Colorado. And she died by a driver that had driven into her lane only 5 minutes from the house. She's a contract nurse working down in Durango, Colorado, testing for COVID and given vaccines. And she was coming back to Parker, Colorado to have a little break. So my stepdad called me, and then, I couldn't really get to bed, and I just decided to go to work to start getting things cleared up so I can try to get to Colorado as quick as possible. The one thing I found was it's quite easy to get out of New Zealand. Now, getting back into New Zealand is a whole nother question. I tried to apply for an application under 3B for emergency allocation. And
before you left, James, you tried to make
before
provision.
I left.
You tried to make provision to get back into the country by applying for an emergency application because you were going overseas because someone had died.
Yes, and my mother. And not only that, there's a family trust involved, and my brother, sister, and I are co-executors on the will. And then obviously my stepdad was sort of alone. There's family a little bit far away, but we just all wanted to obviously get back and help out with this situation.
And it's your mum. That must have been devastating to get that call.
It's very hard, and unfortunately with this, and I've been living in New Zealand since 2000. I got there just before the earthquake, the February earthquake, where I started my master's. And I haven't had as much time with my mom lately as I would have. And I was in the U.S. Army prior to that too, so I've always been rambling around the world.
So what happened with that application that you tried to make before you headed offshore?
The first one I put in, I think I accidentally put 3A versus 3B, but that's when I find out that by the end of the day, it was automatically kicked back, because if you don't fly within 14 days, if your date in the application of when you come back into New Zealand is not 14 days, it will be kicked back no matter what. And it's not, nobody looks at it. It's just the computer kicks it back. And so I went in and I realized, maybe that's because that, and I've seen that it wasn't 3B, which when you go in, it actually states that 14-day waiver, or your 14 days should be wavered because of the situation. So I resubmitted my application, and the problem is there were no flights that could get me to Colorado and have, at least a week, not or even a few days to spend some time with my family, figure the trust stuff out, and be able to get a COVID test 3 days before my flight and turn around. That is even within 14 days. I call up and I try to talk somebody through, and they're very sympathetic, very nice, but the only people you can talk to are just people that, that listen to you. They can't direct you to anybody. They can't, file a complaint. And obviously that's when the first person I've talked to, because I called 4 times that week, advised me to put in a complaint, as well as email the emergency allocations specific email, which I did. I did both of them. And all I got back was a computer-generated response. So, and then I decided, well, I can get a plane ticket, and I'll just apply when I'm 14 days of last Monday. And then it becomes a whole nother mission, because I wait that 14 days and I'm in the U.S., and then my partner, Abby, continues to actually apply for me in my person for the normal allocation. And we went through 3 rounds, and the closest we got was 8,000.
James, how would you describe the whole process in terms of how complex it is and how stressful it is?
I think I would describe the whole system is just sad. There's no excuse for not having somebody that you can actually talk to, that can actually look into the situation. Every time I talk to, it's 5 days and only emails for anybody to get back to me. And I just think that's just wrong.
It was a terrible situation for you at the time, having to travel out of the country, and incredibly stressful and sad to have lost your mum. How much more pressure did this put on you?
Very, very much. You know, New Zealand is a beautiful and awesome country. I love it. It's my adopted home. You know, I plan on staying there, for, most of my life. And, this really hurts, and it didn't seem like a New Zealand thing to do.
James has finally managed to get an emergency allocation. He thinks after 4 or 5 attempts he's lost count, and he starts the journey home to Christchurch this weekend. For Wellington psychiatrist Dr Sarah Romans, the future's less certain. She headed to Melbourne for the birth of her grandchild, but has been stuck there for almost 3 months after the Trans-Tasman bubble burst. Dr Romans has got about 50 patients. Some she can see remotely, but prescribing medication from afar is complicated. Some she's had to refer to other services, and there's a shortage of psychiatrists.
I provide a consultation service in psychiatry, mostly supporting general practitioners with patients who've got anxiety, depression, drug abuse problems, psychosis, but the GPs need more help. And usually they are not able to get the patient seen at the District Health Board for various reasons. I've got a very long waiting list. People, although they have to pay, really want the services of we psychiatrists outside the public health system for different reasons. Yeah.
What is the wait list like for your services as a psychiatrist?
I run typically a 12-month waiting list to assess a new patient.
Sarah, do you have concerns for your patients having been stuck in Australia for so long?
Well, I do. There have been 2 people that ran into a crisis, and I wasn't able to be there and sort it out for them. In both cases, I had to pass it on to someone else, even though I was the person that knew their situation best. And it's quite worrying to be at that one remove. Normally when I'm in Wellington, my people can contact me quickly with a phone call or an email, and I can respond. I can do some of that, but not all of it when I'm away from New Zealand.
You've tried an emergency application. What was the case you put, and what was the outcome of that?
Right, well, I thought I would be an obvious candidate as providing, it was titled Time Critical Health and Disability Service. So I applied under that category, outlined my situation and the kind of work that I do, but I was rejected for 2 reasons, neither of which made any sense to me. One was that I didn't provide an employer's letter, but I'd explained in my application that I'm self-employed. And I gave some thought to alternative documentation and provided 2 relevant letters from people that knew my work. That was one rebuff. The other argument was that I wasn't setting up a new practice. Now, of course I'm not. I've been doing this for several years. But that's not outlined in the criteria as I read them online.
So how long have you been stuck for now, Sarah?
I came for 2 weeks and I've been here 12, so I've been stuck for coming up 3 months.
And the lottery, no joy there?
No, I diligently attend all of those. I've done 4, but I've been way off.
And Dr. Romans, who lives alone, says she was advised by the Ministry of Health to apply for the home self-isolation trial, but she's not eligible because she lives in Wellington and it will only operate in Auckland and Christchurch. Checkpoint asked MB for an interview. It said no one was available. Instead, it sent us a link to its webpage for emergency allocation requests with details of when, how and who could apply. The page notes meeting the criteria doesn't guarantee a spot, and some application categories are prioritised over others. And we'll have more on this story after 6. It is almost 19 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai. E haere aki nei. Coming up, how truancy is tackled in lockdown. New South Wales will soon do away with hotel quarantine. From the 1st of November, fully vaccinated travellers will be allowed in without having to isolate in a hotel or at home. World Watch's Polina Lau reports.
A huge change in the management of COVID across the Tasman.
People, returning Australians, tourists who want to come back, who want to visit Australia, who want to come into Sydney, hotel quarantine will be a thing of the past.
The state's Premier, Dominic Peri, says instead, people arriving in Sydney will have to show proof they've taken a PCR test before boarding their flight and that they've received an approved vaccine. Anyone who isn't fully vaccinated will still need to enter hotel quarantine, but there will only be 210 spots available each week. Since March last year, all those arriving in Australia have had to quarantine in hotels at their own expense for 14 days. Now, a major step change from New South Wales.
So for double vaccinated people right around the world, Sydney, New South Wales is open for business. We want people back. We're leading the nation out of this pandemic. A hotel quarantine, home quarantine is a thing of the past.
Last month, former Premier Gladys Berejiklian said the state would trial home quarantine for international arrivals, but her successor, Mr Peri, has gone one step further.
We are opening Sydney and New South Wales to the world, and that date will come in on 1 November, and we'll continue to work closely with the Commonwealth Government to make sure protections are in place so that we keep people safe, but we rejoin the world.
New South Wales is the only state to announce quarantine-free international travel. All interstate borders to the state will remain closed. It's not clear how this fits into the federal government's reopening plan, and not everyone thinks it's a good idea. Professor Karen Phelps, a doctor, city councillor and former president of the Australian Medical Association, tweeted saying New South Wales abandoning international quarantine, a Commonwealth responsibility the government shirked, will not end well. However, Professor Catherine Bennett, an epidemiologist at Deakin University, says the time is right.
Well, they'll be basing this on the data they've collected in the trials recently. We know the infection rates have been very low in return travellers, less than 0.5%. So we're talking about, very, very low numbers and incredibly rare amongst the fully vaccinated. Only 4% of infections reported. The last time I saw in New South Wales amongst returned travellers actually were in people fully vaccinated. So I think it's a smart plan. It allows people to come back home or come to Australia if they're from other states and at least land in Sydney.
The decision comes as new COVID cases continue to fall in the state. Mr Peri says they can't live in a hermit kingdom and businesses are relying on tourism. Tourism Minister Stuart Ayres says the November date has been chosen to give airlines 2 weeks' notice to add extra flights to New South Wales.
But just hours after that announcement, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has poured water on the plan, saying only Australian citizens, residents and their immediate families will be able to enter New South Wales without quarantining. Homai o whakaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Particularly keen to hear from you if you have applied for an emergency allocation through the system for MIQ, and how was that experience? Pātui mai, you can text me on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. About 3,000 Cantabrians, shortchanged on payouts they received for their quake-damaged homes, are a step closer to getting their money after the settlement of a landmark class action. After a 4-year legal battle that went all the way to the Supreme Court, the lead claimants, Brendan and Colleen Ross, have come to an agreement with government-owned insurer Southern Response. As Conan Young reports, it's an important step in the government paying out roughly $300 million in compensation.
Now in their 70s, the Rosses say this wasn't how they planned to spend their twilight years.
Yeah, it
has been exhausting, to be honest.
It would have been easier not to have sat back and taken back seat and not being the representative in some ways, because a lot of people don't understand the whole complexity of it all. So
would have been far easier not to.
Yeah, far easier not to have actually had to go down that road. But anyway, somebody had to do it.
Despite repeated appeals from a government agency with seemingly bottomless pockets when it came to funding legal battles, the Rosses never considered giving up.
We've got stickability.
Yeah, it's like being in a boxing match. You know, you're on the floor 1 minute, next minute you're up. You just got to keep on going.
At the heart of the case is Southern Response deciding to keep some repair costs hidden from homeowners and underpaying them. While they're coy about the final amount they settled for, they say the most important thing they're taking away from it all is that nobody else will have to go through what they did if another disaster on the scale of Christchurch strikes again.
The law's been clarified to some extent for the small claimant, and I think it'll be good for the future. You have to learn from these things, otherwise you repeat the mistakes, don't you?
Yeah, and you, Colleen, what do you think in terms of the chances of this happening again?
Well, it's like Brendan said, there could be a flood or, there could be lots of different scenarios. But, yeah, I think for the little guy out there on the street, it's really important that we get the legal terms right for other people in the future when they're sort of dealing with insurance.
The settlement allows for the 3,000 homeowners who were part of the class action to reach their own settlements with Southern Response. The Ross's lawyer, Grant Cameron, says that should all start happening over the next few months. He's urging all of those involved to get a lawyer on board so they are paid everything they're entitled to.
Southern Response had what they call detailed repair analysis sheets showing the amount that the insurer had to pay policyholders, but for various reasons Southern Response withheld one sheet, and that revealed a higher number than was revealed to policyholders. So this class action has just been about the difference between those two numbers.
The minister responsible for Southern Response, David Clark, has been approached for comment. He's previously said a sum of $300 million has been set aside to compensate those shortchanged by the claims settlement agency.
The lengthy Auckland lockdown is making it even harder to address truancy, with growing concern some children will disappear from education entirely. School principals have told Checkpoint as few as 40% of their students are engaging with online learning, saying access to devices and a lack of internet access is also an issue. Organisations like Waipareira Trust help schools, whānau and rangatahi deal with truancy problems. Its director, Whānau Ora, Jackie Harima, joins us now. Kia ora. How much more challenging is it to deal with truancy during lockdown?
It's so much more harder because these are the families that don't have, as the principals have said, they don't have devices, they don't have access to data. So we rely on our relationship we can build face to face. So it's via Zoom now where they've got the capability. And it just makes it really hard to communicate, understand what's going on with them to further then support them get back into school or get back into some sort of learning pathway.
Yeah, because Jackie, normally in some instances I see you pick them up, you drive them to class, you go and have a chat to them, find something that interests them and try and get them engaged. And it is that kind of, that face-to-face kōrero that really works. So can you do the same over Zoom or how are you adapting?
It is over Zoom, it is over the phone. You and every organisation has to adapt. And we have found that our rangatahi or young people do adapt to the situation. But we're very relational people. We like to meet face to face. So everything that we can do over Zoom, we do. Everything we can do on the phone, we do. Everything through FaceTime, we do. Social media is a way that they relate. So a lot of it's, through social media as well. So we will just try to adapt best way to make that connection with them and help them.
Jackie, what does your workload look like now compared to before lockdown?
Oh my gosh. For our staff dealing with rangatahi was very great. It would be ringing them, visiting them, liaising with schools face to face, going into the school, going into other providers that might be able to help them. Now it's how many can we contact over the phone? How many can we Zoom? Sometimes we will do a visit. We'll put on PPE gear and go and visit if we have some concerns for the family. But a lot of it now is also the conversation is around who's vaccinated in your family. Do you have food? What's happening? Do you need access to data? Do you need a Chromebook that's going to help you stay engaged? Do you need some support with learning? So all those conversations are happening, but virtually now.
How hard do you reckon it is going to be to undo some of the negative effects of lockdown on education and, attendance?
It was hard before lockdown, so we were dealing with kids that weren't going. We were still dealing with the repercussions of the last lockdown from March last year. And because it's going on for so much longer in Tamaki, is even harder for them. They're talking to us about things like having a routine. That was hard to implement, while they were going to school. But now when you've got other kids at home, maybe their parents aren't around because they're essential work. Some 14, 15-year-olds are being the leads in their families and trying to implement routines. So it's so much harder, and we're fearful that the impacts are going to be so much longer for these families.
Jackie, do you worry that some of these kids just simply won't come back to class?
That happened the last lockdown. This is going to be worse.
What was it like last time in terms of kids that just completely dropped away?
Some of them they had the financial pressure, so they went in and tried to look for work for their family. They had the pressure of not having a device, so it was worse before. This time is so much harder because they're dealing with that last lockdown on top of this lockdown, and their family are struggling. Simple things like having all your kids at home all day, financial burden on the family because they just got to feed them all day. So it's going to be so much harder.
Really appreciate your time, Jackie. That is Jackie Harema, who's from Waipareta Trust there, talking about how they engage kids and concerns that there's going to be more of them that just simply drop out of the system due to the extended lockdown in Tamaki Makaurau. It is 5:30, kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A bid to relive the community spirit, hijinks and inter-town competitiveness of telethons of the past will get underway across the country this weekend with the Super Saturday Vaxathon. Up and down the country, vaccination clinics will be open as well as pop-up locations, with many offering freebies, entertainment and food to try, and in a bid to bump up Aotearoa's vaccination rates. Rachel Graham has more.
Thank you very much for your kind donation. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very, very much. Thank you very much for your kind donation. Thank you very, very, very much.
Telethons of old were all about bringing together the community to raise funds. Tomorrow's Super Saturday Vaxathon endeavours to bring together the community to give vaccination numbers a much-needed boost. One of the organisers of the event, Tāmati Shepherd Wepiti from the Ministry of Health, says organisers will be encouraging people to stick to social distancing requirements, but also want to create a fun atmosphere.
We're in level 2 and we're in level 3, so we've had to issue guidelines about how you're going to do that safely in terms of the Vaxathon. We're trying to figure out how do we do the conga in the Avalon TV studios, 1.5 metres, 2 metres apart. Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but we've got this.
DHBs, health providers and community groups in small towns and big cities are helping put on the events. In Waitara, a clinic will be held by health provider Tui Ora. Bianca Ruakiri says people getting vaccinated are helping themselves and their community.
We have a coffee card on the go, free coffees, free sausage sizzle, and anybody who gets vaccinated there not only get a $20 New World voucher to spend, but they are also going to be making donations to the Waitara Food Bank, $20 for every vaccination that gets done at that clinic tomorrow. We've also got some draws for grocery hampers, and 12 to 18-year-olds can go in the draw to win a Yuri Boom speaker.
Tui Ora will also have a clinic in New Plymouth with a live DJ, bacon and egg fry bread giveaways and more $20 supermarket vouchers. East Christchurch has some of the lowest vaccination rates in Christchurch, and Kate O'Grady, the manager at health provider The Loft in Eastgate Mall, is hoping they can lift those numbers this weekend.
As part of 90% for Canterbury, the Christchurch Chamber of Commerce have donated a rollicking gelato van. We've also got Mitre 10 Barbecue coming down. We've got the Black Thunders who are going to be out in the main car park. There's a big bouncy castle. We've got loads of prizes to give away.
In Queenstown, people can get vaccinated while enjoying a view of Lake Wakatipu aboard the Earnslaw on Saturday. Queenstown has one of the highest vaccination rates in the country, but the Chief Executive Officer of Real NZ, Stephen England Hall, says they wanted to help encourage the remaining few.
They'll board the vessel, they'll get their vaccination, and then they'll head upstairs to the promenade deck where they can receive a free barista coffee from the Ernst Floor crew while they'll undergo observation. And then at the end of that, of course, they get the chance to have a tour of the vessel if they wish to while she's tied up. And then on the way out of the boat back to the wharf, they can spin the wheel and be in to win some trips or treats.
In Auckland, the Super Saturday attractions will include TV and sports stars, Mr Whippy trucks, free coffee and food, spot prizes and dress-ups. But with Auckland still under Level 3 restrictions and new cases popping up every day, Dr Sarah Hartnell, the Clinical Operations Lead for the Auckland Vaccination Programme, says special care has been taken to make sure the events are safe.
A lot of the focus for our activities are outside always, so that's the first important thing that we've sort of made clear. Distancing is really, really important, particularly if there is food and drink around. Really need to be tight and careful on keeping people in their bubbles and distanced appropriately. PPE, making sure that people are masked, good hand hygiene.
But the events, entertainment and enticements are not evenly spread around the country. And Federated Farmers Southland Share Milkers Chair, Jason Herrick, doesn't think it will be of much use for farmers. He says this is a particularly busy time of year.
We're calving and mating in particular on dairy farms, and there's a lot of sheep farmers lambing at the moment. So, and arable guys are flat out trying to put crops in the ground. So time away from farmers is precious time at this time of year. So they might be feeling the pressures from all angles on whether they can get off farm to get it done.
Information about local events is available on the Ministry of Health website and local DHB websites.
Okay, let me know if you're going to tune into the Vaxathon and if you're going to go and get your first or second jab over this epic weekend, and why not. Text me on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. E te iwi e haere nei I a Checkpoint. The Serious Fraud Office investigates alleged wage subsidy abuse. And a Mr Whippy frenzy in Dunedin as the bells of the ice cream van ring out for the first time in 10 years. Homai o whakaro, we would love your feedback. Have you been out to meet the Mr Whippy truck if you're down in Dunners? Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Whakawelahi. Thank you, Lisa. The emergency allocation system for MIQ is being criticised for demanding unrealistic levels of evidence and approving very few cases. Documents released under the Official Information Act show fewer than 10% of applications were approved in some categories, principally related to medical treatment or caring for family. The group Grounded Kiwis advocates for New Zealanders trying to navigate MIQ and is taking legal action over the system. More than 120 extra COVID vaccination sites will be open for tomorrow's Super Saturday event. Special events will be happening across the country to encourage people to get vaccinated. Free ice cream, sausage sizzles, live music and spot prizes will be on offer across locations, along with appearances from some famous faces. New South Wales has announced quarantine-free international travel starting November the 1st. Quarantine requirements and caps for overseas arrivals will be removed for those fully vaccinated. The Serious Fraud Office is looking into alleged abuse of the wage subsidy scheme. It says the allegations relate to multiple complex cases that have been referred following Ministry for Social Development investigations. Around 3,000 Cantabrians shortchanged on the payouts for their quake-damaged homes are a step closer to getting their money after the settlement of a class action. The settlement between government-owned insurer Southern Response and lead claimants Brendan and Colleen Ross allows others in the action to reach their own settlements. And the nurses organisation has settled their long-running pay dispute with the district health boards. Negotiations lasted 15 months, but 83% of the union's 32,000 members voted yes to accept the latest offer. The union's lead advocate, David Waite, says the agreement addresses pay issues and makes important progress towards safe staffing. Those are the headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Kia ora rā, e ho no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa e nai anei, ko Nona Peltier, who's here to talk business. Let's start with manufacturing activity. Nona, apparently it's starting to rebound as lockdown restrictions, well, ease a tiny bit.
Yeah, they're definitely rebounding. We've seen ourselves move from what was quite significant contraction in August. That was a 39.7 point contraction, 50 meaning it's expanding. So today, we are at 51.4, which is pretty strong. Of course, the northern region is weak, and you'd expect that with Auckland continuing in lockdown. But overall, it does even that region is starting to look a little bit more positive. A lot is going to depend on when we move out of this lockdown situation, but for the meantime, it's certainly a positive sign.
And Nona, the economy should come back strongly from lockdowns, says who?
Infometrics, they did some study on where they think the economy is going, and they think that there's an awful lot of upside, and that's because job numbers remain high, and people have been saving their money. Well, I guess some people have been saving their money through lockdown, and they're going to spend it once they get their chances to go out and enjoy it again. He says that, this is Gareth Kiernan, who's the chief forecaster, he says that he's expecting the economy to grow 3.6% in 2022. That's quite a high number. But he says, look, there's still a lot of uncertainty around that number. And again, it goes to how long the lockdown in the Auckland region continues.
And Nona, let's take a whiz around the markets.
Yes, let's. Our dollar is doing really well. Overnight, we had quite a strong gain. We're trading at 70.5 US cents, 95.1 Australian and 51.5 British pence. The top 50 index, it fell about 0.25% today. It dropped 36 points to 13,012.
Thanks, Nona. Have a great weekend picnicking. That's Nona Peltier with our business news. The Serious Fraud Office has started looking into businesses which may have abused the wage subsidy scheme. More than $3 billion has been paid out in the latest round of subsidies. The bill is far less than was paid out in last year's lockdowns, when many large companies were criticised for claiming millions of dollars and later posting profits. Nita Blake-Person has more.
Independent tax researcher Michael Gourmet first raised the alarm about abuse of the wage subsidy scheme last year. More than $13 billion was paid out, with the Ministry for Social Development later criticised for not doing enough thorough checks on who had taken what. Gourmet says the situation appears to be worse than he suspected.
If it's got to the SCFO stage, then clearly there's some very serious issues here to be addressed. I mean, there's a fairly high bar before the SCFO is going to take interest in any issues in the first place. So for it to got to that, this is going to be very interesting to find out who's been up to what and what exactly is involved and who's involved.
The Serious Fraud Office says inquiries are underway into multiple complex cases of potential fraud that were referred following Ministry of Social Development investigations. The SFO received government funding to specifically tackle fraud arising from the COVID-19 pandemic, and it says they'll be contributing specialist investigative teams to look into cases of a particularly challenging and complex nature. $3.1 billion has been paid out in wage subsidies since the Delta outbreak. Michael Gourmet says businesses have responded quite differently this time around.
Behaviour has changed now that we know more about how the system operated last year and where it went wrong, and so people are being more mindful of that. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of small businesses out there that are doing it so bad, and they're the ones that need funds, not to be having funds paid out to people who are avoiding the system.
Rachel Taylor is the founder of the New Zealand Self-Employed and Small Business Association. She says it's a huge challenge for many at the moment.
It's tough, but some businesses are adapting. There's a lot of businesses that are heading online and opening up e-commerce websites, or they're slightly tweaking the products and the services that they're offering so they can do them with the restrictions that have been placed on us. There are other businesses, your hairdressers, who are definitely struggling. They're unable to be open at the moment. You've got your osteos, your physios. There are definitely companies out there who are struggling.
While last time the wage subsidy was paid out in one lump sum, this year businesses have had to reapply every 2 weeks. The first round saw $1.3 billion paid out, the second dropped to $900 million, $600 million in the third round and $200 million in the fourth. A new round opens today. The largest recipients are the construction, accommodation and food services industries. Rachel Taylor says many businesses want clarity about the government's plan for the coming months, and that's affecting their behaviour with the wage subsidy.
Well, speaking to an organisation who had claimed the wage subsidy, and they were currently into discussions to voluntarily repay the amount after performing better than they had initially anticipated. However, just again due to the uncertainty of what was going to happen within the next few months, they were slightly hesitant about when to do that.
The Ministry of Social Development says it's received just over $757 million in wage subsidy repayments, both voluntary and requested. It's filed separate criminal charges against 2 people and says there will be more prosecutions to come.
Weddings in Alert Level 3 can still go ahead, but rather than lush and lavish, they need to be more bespoke, intimate celebrations for just 10 people. From flowers to multi-tier cakes and large orders of champagne, everything in Level 3 is on a much smaller scale. But as reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi discovered, many couples have given up waiting for domestic and international borders to open and are going ahead anyway.
In Level 3, Northland, Auckland and parts of the Waikato, it's goodbye to a large guest list and I do to 10 nearest and dearest. Food and drinks are a social distance sit-down affair and guests are urged to stay away from those not in their bubble, so no congratulatory hugs or kisses. Wedding planner Tuila Benioni runs Wedding She Wrote in Auckland. She says lots of clients are going ahead with their weddings, forced to get creative with such a tight guest list.
But the ingenious ways that guests are thinking up, and even I guess the couples with the guests, are like drive-through weddings, like they pull up and they watch on the live stream, but at the same time they're in the same space as the couple getting married. So I didn't think of that, but the guests thought of that, and I was like, wow, that's such a cool, beautiful way to still celebrate this moment.
After seeing the demand for Level 3 wedding ceremonies, they created their own pop-up wedding package, including everything from the celebrant, a live stream for absent guests, decorations and even masks. She puts that demand down to a lot of her clients giving up on waiting for borders to reopen.
They're wanting their family and friends, their key family and friends, to be there too, at their wedding here in New Zealand. So they're coming from the other side of the world where they're relying on border restrictions. They're relying on the government essentially to make the decision for them.
After many couples postponed their weddings last year, this year, less is more.
They still experience the same joy that they would if they were to get married with a bigger crowd. And I think actually it's probably more special, you're really in the moment with your partner, so they don't regret it.
And the downscaling is everywhere, from flowers to food. A cake for 100 people or more is now a mini version for 10.
This is probably our standard wedding cake size here. This would normally feed 110 people. Obviously that's not an option right now, so easily downsizable to either a small little 2-tier here if you really want a tier cake for your bubble, or just a little single tier cake here as well. That would work. Again, we're just seeing single tiers for little bubbles, even outdoors now with your celebrations that you have without outdoor celebrations, just single tier cakes.
Sweet Bites Cake Shop in Henderson specialises in wedding and celebration cakes. Owner Angela Clapperton explains brides and grooms are having to make some tough decisions.
They're hoping for either level 2, 100 people and under, so reducing the size of their cake, or if they're having 10 people weddings, then just little either miniature versions of their original cake, or just a smaller size of the cake that they had.
Though it doesn't make their work any easier, shrinking the cake doesn't mean skimping on detail. Inside the kitchen, masked and socially distanced, bakers are busy icing, painting and moulding decorations to create masterpieces, mini-size. And even those that have postponed their big day entirely are still celebrating the original date with a treat.
Original date, they want to have a little something to celebrate when they would have been technically getting married, so they're having like little mini cakes on those dates, just to, have a little feel good.
Wedding planners, bakers, brides and grooms are all hoping for a much bigger and brighter restriction-free start to 2022.
It is 12 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki ina pita kōrero. After the news at 6, is it mission almost impossible to get an emergency spot in MIQ? And which category offers you the best chance of getting a spot? Organisers of a Hawke's Bay cycling event have had to pull the pin because someone's been scattering spikes and other sharp objects on the path it uses. Cyclocross, which is like cross-country cycling, takes place every second Wednesday in Hawke's Bay. But for the last 2 weeks, organisers have found thumbtacks, suspended barbed fish hooks and trenches dug across the tracks. Now, it's had to can plans for a big event next month. Ivor Hopman is the event organiser and joins me now. Hi, Ivor. What do you reckon's going on here?
I'm actually really sad, that somebody had to go through all these lengths, not this length, and do this to an event, and to a great pathway we build on the stop banks. And, it's really sad. I won't get mad because that's not worth it, But, if we have to cancel something because of COVID and the levels go up and it's for the good of the nation, I can understand it. But to suspend racing for something like this, it's really sad.
Can you describe them to me, what these booby traps look like? Because they sound pretty hideous.
Yeah, they're just a whole lot of thumb tags and a board dug into the ground with spikes sticking out, screws sticking out of it. And then this week we found a suspended fish hooks of about head high. So luckily we find them all before they do any damage. But imagine doing somebody riding in that fish hook. I've got first aid, but I don't want to work on that. That would have been horrendous.
Yeah, so they're pretty sophisticated and quite targeted. If you're saying that they're barbed fish hooks hung at a cyclist's head height.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's done with intent. It's not, happy-go-lucky. It's done with intent, and that's the sad thing about it. And so far, nobody ever came to talk to us, about it. If somebody comes up with a reason, we can talk about it. We ever start a dialogue, and we come to a solution. We can work around this, but to do this, like that, I'm baffled. It's sad. It's really, really sad.
Ivor, any clues to who might be annoyed with the cycling or may have a vendetta?
No, that's what we don't know. Nobody ever came to see us and written to us, and even on the Facebook pages, nothing comes up. In the paper, nothing came up. We don't know, and that's the hard thing. The person hasn't got a face, and if they had a face, we can talk about it. We come to a solution, and if they're not happy with it, we can always, we'll work around it.
So what would you say to that person, Ivor, if they're listening or they hear you? What would you say to them? What do you want them to do?
Just come and talk to us, and we have a good korero about it, and we can work it out. And then, and if they don't like what we're doing, we can alter. We can go to the other side of the river if they want us, because we have tracks on the other side of the river as well. But if they don't like us, we go somewhere else. But if it's for a sad reason, sorry, no, we're not gonna budge. But if they have a genuine reason, we can go to the other side. But we can talk about it. Always talk about it.
So you've had to cancel your big event in November as well. That's a little way off. Why did you make that decision?
It's too dangerous now to go ahead, and unless we come to the find the person who did this, we come to an understanding that they're not gonna boycott their one, because we do have to do all the work and then have to cancel on the day because it's too dangerous. We can't do that. That's we can't wait till the last day and then find holy for spikes. And if the person comes forward, we can talk about it, and if we come to the solution, we go ahead with it because we love to run the event. But
how many people were you expecting, Ivor, for that?
We have to stay within 100 because of, the COVID rules, but, at least with 100 people having fun.
Yeah.
And now there are 100 people missing out, so it's sad. It's sad.
Have you been talking to the police about this?
Yeah, been reported to the police, but, you can't get fingerprints of fish hooks, that's a bit hard. But, so we're looking at a couple of different ways of try to come to a good end.
It's pretty nasty, though, isn't it, Ivor?
It is real nasty. It's targeted. It's nasty because now imagine if we have young kids riding there. If a young kid gets it in their face, they'll be scarred for life. I'm a bit older, I'm a bit uglier, so it doesn't matter much. But for the young kids, it'd be. How do you explain it to a kid? How are you going to explain this? That they had a fist bump in the face? You can't. It's sad.
Ivor, really appreciate your time and best of luck. That is Ivor Hotman, who is one of the event organisers for its cyclocross, and their off-road track is being booby-trapped with some pretty vicious stuff, as you heard there, including head-height fish hooks. I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream, or at least that's the hope, as Mr Whippy returns to the streets of Dunedin. It's been more than 10 years since the ice cream vendor was based permanently in the southern city, but after a few visits for events, the new owners are hoping to whip up a frenzy for their soft serves with the new Dunedin-based truck. Our reporter Tess Brunton and cameraman Nathan McKinnon tracked down Mr Whippy in Mosgiel for a serve of the good news.
It's Carmen Copeland's first week behind the wheel of a Mr Whippy van, and already she's been greeted by swarms of people.
My very first day I was very intimidated, but I played the music. I came here to the park, opened the door, and there was a mass swarm of children. A lot of them were running away from their parents, and just seeing the joy in their faces when they see the truck, and especially the elderly as well that can remember the music.
She's proud to be managing the new Dunedin truck, covering from Palmerston to Balclutha. It's been a cold few days of rain, hail and little shine, but that didn't stop the official launch over the weekend.
Launch day we gave away about 600 ice creams. When we got to the Octagon it was raining, so we were a little bit disappointed, but there was families waiting in the rain because we had plastered it all over social media. And we finished in there at 3 o'clock, and it was just received with so much joy and happy because they were free.
She'll have regular street runs and beach days while also covering events. Carmen says people can use a GPS link on the Mr Whippy Dunedin Facebook page to track down their dessert. Already, she's noticing a few crowd favourites.
Waffle chocolate dip with a flake is very, very requested by older people as well. The kids try and get it, but they get dropped down a few levels and they just allowed plain, much to their dismay.
5-year-old Mackenzie was ready to tuck into her morning treat, a single fruit stick ice cream.
I like it because it has got lots of flavours.
And lots of colours.
Yeah.
Patsy hasn't eaten a Mr Whippy since her children were young.
The kids used to hear the Mr Whippy's music and I'd have to whistle loudly so they wouldn't be at the gate.
It didn't take long for Patsy to make her decision.
Well, I like waffle tone and I didn't even know they were here. I've been to the supermarket and I saw people walking past with ice creams and I thought, what a good idea.
Fruzo slushies are Stevie's favourite, but her 6-year-old brother, Jake, got an ice cream.
What do you like about them?
I don't know, I just like slushies. Yeah, I like the flavour.
Jake got a few additions for his ice cream.
I like sprinkles and ice cream
and the lolly.
11-year-old Avia has her hands full after a trip to Mr Whippy.
It looks like it's got quite an array of different things. What's on your Whippy treat?
It looks like the astronaut straw, the six but colourful, and it looks like sour lollies.
Linda Mitchell has been running Mr Whippy in Central Otago and Queenstown Lakes for the past 10 years, popping down to Dunedin for events. She and her husband bought the Dunedin franchise and a new truck after promising demand.
People remember it from their childhood. They love to bring their children out and say, this is the ice cream that we got when we were a child. They love the sound of green sleeves. They love seeing the vans coming door to door, and it's our iconic Mr Whippy mix that really stands out there with the lovely creamy taste.
With the school holidays nearly over, Mr Whippy's hoping for a hot and busy summer.
Oh, you could hear the crunch on Tessa's ice cream there as she broke into the chocolate topping. Greensleeves, can someone tell me why Mr Whippy uses that tune? And OMG, you can track Mr Whippy with GPS now. That could be incredibly dangerous. Let me know about the tune. Text me on 2101. I want to know why they use that particular tune. A lot of you getting in touch about emergency allocations. This listener says, with home isolation for COVID-positive people imminent, it makes no sense whatsoever for New Zealand residents who are double vaccinated with negative PCR tests to spend 2 weeks in MIQ. Why cannot the government stop this madness and open up the borders for this category and low-risk individuals right now, says Rowan from Napier. Another listener says, I know of a New Zealand citizen working for the New Zealand government in the UK whose father in New Zealand died. It took him 4 months to get a slot in MIQ before he got home to grieve with his mother. Stuart says that it frustrates me to hear these complaints from people who have travelled overseas struggling to return. My brother and I live in New Zealand and got the terrible news that Dad had a few days to live. It didn't take us long to realise there was no guarantee of our return and therefore did not return to the UK. There is a global pandemic. Travel is difficult. You take a chance of delayed return if you choose to travel, says Stuart. On Super Saturday, the Vaxathon. Someone here says, Super Saturday spreadathon? ? I know they're taking great measures to make sure people are social distanced, wearing masks and other people with PPE, so we really hope not. Christina says, the Vaxathon should be great, alas for the strange reasons. So many will be captive audiences. Yeah, you got that right, Christina, for more than one reason. Silly me, I was vaccinated in July, this person says. All I was offered was a glass of tepid water. Next pandemic, I'm waiting for the incentives.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Marama Tipole. The emergency allocation system for MIQ is being criticised for demanding unrealistic levels of evidence and approving very few cases in some categories. According to documents released under the Official Information Act, fewer than 10% of applications were approved. Grounded Kiwis spokesperson Martin Newell says MB is making unreasonable requests to those applying.
Examples of where MB is asking applicants to go to their local embassy to apply for, to get a letter from the embassy saying that they have a mental illness. I'm not an expert on the qualifications of MPAT staff, but they are not psychiatrists and doctors and qualified to give that kind of a medical opinion.
The Grounded Kiwis group is taking legal action over the MIQ system, and Martin Newell will be speaking to Checkpoints shortly. South Aucklanders believe lockdown fatigue and uncertainty about the current restrictions could be contributing to rule breaking. Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson said yesterday that a large number of cases have been traced to gatherings inside homes, which are banned under Level 3. People at Western Springs Park told RNZ they were disappointed but not surprised by that. One, David Barker, says the current rules limiting social interaction to outdoor meetings are unrealistic and not working. He says the government is not giving people a clear picture of what they can and cannot do. Auckland schools can run exams at Alert Level 3 if they believe they're necessary. The Education Ministry has been granting exemptions allowing schools in the region to bring small groups of pupils back to class. That includes 16 that want to offer the Cambridge and International Baccalaureate exams. The Ministry has now issued a directive clarifying the rules for running exams at Level 3. They include keeping pupils in bubbles of 10 and maintaining physical distancing. The Ministry says at the moment it's not considering NCEA exams. The Qualifications Authority is leading work on how to apply alert level rules to those. The lead advocate at the nurses' organisation says he's pleased the district health boards have finally put forward an acceptable offer. More than 80% of the union members who voted agreed to accept the latest offer after more than 15 months of protracted negotiations. The union's David Waite says DHBs took the advice of the Employment Relations Authority after mediation last month. He says the agreement addresses pay issues and makes important progress towards safe staffing.
We're very happy with the result. Members are very happy. It's a large margin and it's the highest turnout of any ballot that we've had, and that really shows the unity of the members that we've had right the way through this campaign.
The agreement is backdated to August last year and will run until the end of October next year. The Health Minister Andrew Little says there's still more work for the government to do to improve pay and working conditions for nurses. Andrew Little welcomes the settlement, which deals with the immediate issue of making sure nurses get a pay rise, but he says their pay equity claim is still underway. He says nurses are also rightly concerned about staffing levels, and action is being taken to recruit nurses into those vacant positions. Around 3,000 Cantabrians shortchanged on the payouts for their quake-damaged homes are a step closer to getting their money after the settlement of a class action. The settlement between government-owned insurer Southern Response and lead claimants Brendan and Colleen Ross allows others to reach their own settlements. The Rosses, who are coy on the final amount they agreed on, say they never considered giving up.
We've got stickability.
Yeah, it's like being in a boxing match. You know, you're on the floor 1 minute, next minute you're up. You just got to keep on going.
The Minister responsible for Southern Response, David Clark, has previously said $300 million has been set aside as compensation. Microsoft is shutting down the Chinese version of its professional networking site, LinkedIn. The platform for job seekers and employers was the last major US social network operating in China. Correspondent Rachel Silverman reports.
Microsoft is citing what it calls a challenging operating environment as a reason for shutting down the Chinese version of LinkedIn. According to the Wall Street Journal, earlier this year, Chinese regulators demanded that the platform be more strict in regulating content. LinkedIn later blocked the profiles of several human rights advocates, academics, and journalists, a move which led to criticism in the United States. LinkedIn had over 50 million users and offered, among other things, a way for Chinese businesses to connect with overseas customers.
It's 6:05. The Black Caps skipper Kane Williamson says his hamstring's fine, but a frustrating elbow issue will have to be managed throughout the T20 Cricket World Cup. Williamson missed Hyderabad Sunrisers' last match in the IPL due to a hamstring strain and continues to be bothered by the long-standing elbow tendon injury. 2 months of rehab has improved things a little, but he's still not 100%.
I mentioned sort of taking basically full parts in training. There is some load management going on and things just to keep helping it, but certainly have the intention of taking a full part.
New Zealand's bid for a first T20 World Cup begins against Pakistan and the UAE in just under 2 weeks' time. Liam Lawson says he's accepted an apology from the driver who cost him the German Touring Car Championship. Lawson was leading the standings heading into the final race last weekend, but run off the track by South African rival Kelvin van der Linde. Lawson says he was too angry to talk after the race, but they spoke a couple of days later.
At that point, I was sort of past the being angry at him and more just disappointed for the result. And I think on top of that, he was getting sent some pretty horrible stuff. Nobody deserves the kind of messages he was getting, no matter what they've done. So I feel like there's no point being angry at it anymore. So between me and him, we're okay.
Tour de France organisers have unveiled a highly treacherous route for the 2022 cycling event, which will feature gusting winds, cobblestones and punishing mountain stages. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Shane Carter joins Charlotte Ryan on this week's mixtape. And for Friday Nights Live, we join electronic multi-instrumentalist Sean Donnelly, aka SJD, performing with his band at Mercury Theatre October 2015. And to celebrate Friedrich Nietzsche's birthday, we have a sonic tonic dedicated to philosophy. That's your Friday Nights with me, Karen Hay, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday, Northland, Auckland. Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Gisborne. Mainly fine. A few showers this evening about the ranges of Bay of Plenty and Gisborne. Becoming cloudy in Northland tomorrow evening with a few late showers. From Waikato to Kapiti, including the central high country. Cloudy with isolated light showers about the higher ground. Becoming fine tomorrow morning. For Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington, fine weather. Bulla and Westland mainly fine, but morning and evening cloud with a few showers in Westland. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from areas of morning and evening cloud for southern Canterbury. Otago and Southland, partly cloudy, light showers in the east and about Stewart Island this evening, clearing tomorrow morning. For Fiordland, a few showers, and the Chatham Islands expect fine spells. It's 6:08.
La mihi marama. Kia ora anō, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The emergency allocation system for spots in MIQ is cumbersome and demands an unrealistic level of evidence, with fewer than 10% of applications being approved in some categories, according to an advocacy group. 350 managed isolation rooms are set aside each fortnight for critical travel, where the person is unlikely to get a spot in time through the lottery system. Categories include travelling for medical treatment, to care for the terminally ill, look after a child, or because of the death of a close family member. The group Grounded Kiwis helps New Zealanders trying to navigate MIQ and is taking legal action over the system. Spokesperson Martin Newell says MB figures it's obtained under the Official Information Act suggest emergency MIQ spots are being left empty despite hundreds of applications. How difficult is it to get a spot via emergency allocations in MIQ?
Well, from the data that we've received from MB through the OIA request, there were a total of 1,550 rooms based on their allocation of 350 a fortnight. And over July and August, only 772 applications were approved out of a total of 3,500. So basically, your chances of getting an emergency allocation request is about 1 in 5 applications are approved.
What categories are proving most difficult to get an emergency allocation in, and which are the ones that you're most likely to get an approval?
So probably the one that really surprises us is Category 2C, where only 5% of applications have been approved. That's the category where New Zealand citizens or residents are unable to legally remain in their current location and have no option to return home. So if you've been working somewhere, you've perhaps lost your job in the pandemic, and you need to return to New Zealand, you are unable to do so. And one of the challenges with that particular category that we've been hearing repeatedly is that the government is or MB is requiring people to get a letter from the country that they're in, stating that they have no right to reside there before they can come home. And in a lot of cases, they're being laughed literally out of government offices because they don't provide such information. The most successful category is Category 2F, where 80% of all applications have been approved, and the total number of applications is only 55, and what was approved is 44, and that's residents of Pacific countries that need access to time-critical medical treatment that's been scheduled in New Zealand and unavailable in their own country.
So what about other categories where you may be wanting to come home to care for someone, and you know, one of those examples is to care for a minor, a child?
Yeah, exactly. So Category 1A, they had 897 applications between the 1st of July and the 6th of September. Only 129 were approved. So it was the largest category, or largest number of applications for a single category, with a 14% approval rate. Now, the stories that we're hearing about a lot of the applicants in that scenario is that if there is a parent in the country, they are refusing the application because they are saying that, well, there is already a parent that can care for that dependent, and there is no need for them to approve the request for the second parent. Now, I'm sure many of your listeners are parents themselves, and you can imagine the stress that this causes families for the parent that is stuck away from their child. Now, there is I think a natural parental instinct that if your child is sick or unwell, you want to be able to return to care for that child, to support your partner or the child's other parent to share the care of that child. And in other instances, we've had where actually there is a biological parent in the country, but they have not been the guardian of that child, but they are being, in the view of MB, they are sufficient to take care of that child, when actually the guardianship and the care of that child has been in the hands of another guardian or parental or support arrangement. So that child's effectively being passed into the care of someone that they've not been historically looked after.
So how you deal with a lot of people through Grounded Kiwis. So how would you sum up their experiences with the system in terms of ease of applying and the evidence that they're having to produce?
The evidentiary burden that we're seeing in a lot of these cases is really holding people back in terms of the ability to kind of put together an emergency allocation request. We've had examples of where MB is asking applicants to go to their local embassy to apply for, to get a letter from the embassy saying that they have a mental illness. I'm not an expert on the qualifications of MPAT staff. They're extremely talented and hardworking, I'm sure, but they're not psychiatrists and doctors and qualified to give that kind of a medical opinion. So what is being asked here for applicants is exceeding the information that is possible for them to get. One other point I'd like to make is that the length of time to respond is too long. MB gives itself, or it used to give itself, 3 days. It would commit to 3 days. It's now removed this from its website. In most cases, we're finding that MB is responding to people after 10 days and then asking for more info. Now, for those of you that don't know, the emergency allocation request needs to be applied for within 14 days of when you need to travel. So if they come back to you after 10 days asking for more information, and then at that point they use that request for more information as a way to ask for more time and reset the clock so another 14 days starts again. So they're pushing out the timeline to approve what are some quite time-sensitive requests. And then in other cases, what we're hearing is that they are granting the emergency approval for an MIQ spot on the 14th day, the day that people have flights booked. Now, they're not allowing people enough time to organise their lives to get to an airport and get on a flight and get to New Zealand. So they're missing that spot.
And that's Martin Newell from Grounded Kiwis. MB says it counts application numbers rather than the individuals involved. When Checkpoint asked for an interview, it said no one was available, instead sending us a link to its webpage for emergency allocation requests with details of when, how and who could apply. The page does note that meeting the criteria doesn't guarantee a spot and some application categories are prioritised over others. We've had a bit of feedback on this one. One listener says, I feel that the emergency room should be at 90% capacity at all times. The last 10% should be kept for genuinely last-minute needs. Anything less is unacceptably wasteful for precious and scarce resources. This person says it is cruel to stop people needing to return to being with dying whānau or any of the other categories. And another listener has written, would it be so hard for the people allocating these rooms to ask themselves how they would like to be treated if they were in the same position? Another round of the wage subsidy opens today, and with Auckland in its 9th week of lockdown, businesses say they can't hold on much longer. Hamish Cardwell spoke to some of them.
The end of another bleak week for Aucklanders. COVID-19 cases are ballooning, first dose vaccinations are stalling, and the new reality sinking in that it's likely to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. To ease the economic torture lockdown inflicts, a new round of the government's wage subsidy opened today, with more than $3 billion having been dished out since the Delta outbreak began. About another $1 billion has gone on the Resurgence Support Scheme, contributing to businesses' fixed costs like rent. But Business Manukau General Manager Kerry Burridge says the government's subsidies are just a drop in the bucket.
So the businesses, many, thousands of them, are on the verge of falling over. They need more help. So what's been provided is not going to be enough unless we can open up and get a lot more customers very quickly.
Kerry Burridge says lots of businesses have closed already, and many landlords have been cutting rent deals with tenants and have no buffer left. She says a rent rebate or subsidy must be put on the table.
The coffers of the landlords have run dry in the main. They're really suffering financially and are struggling to pay their mortgages. And we have businesses who can't afford to pay their landlords. Because as you can imagine, for most of them, their rent or lease costs are their biggest outgoing. And it's just crippling them. If they haven't got income coming in, they can't keep going.
Stephen Crooks owns the Westie Food Group, which makes pre-packaged food and meals and employs more than 200 staff. He paints a bleak economic picture since the COVID-19 virus swept the globe.
Simple facts, 25% of the total New Zealand market disappeared for whatever reason, whether it be international students, whether it be tourism. So 78 weeks of trade since COVID began last year, and we've lost 31 weeks of trade. And that's just not sustainable.
As the chair of the Rosebank Business Association, Stephen Brooks says not knowing what the future holds plagues his members.
Dart players go to a board with 3 darts and they throw out numbers. We go into a dart board with no darts and no numbers because we don't know what we're aiming for. So to even try and work out how we're going to survive for the next 2 weeks, let alone the next 6 to 12 months, we just don't know what we're aiming for.
There's wide support for Mayor Phil Goff's call to the government for more targeted support, but no word on any developments. Financial advisor Bernie McRae from Abbott Insurance Brokers in the Auckland suburb of Avondale says you have to give credit to the talent and resilience of businesses who've made it this far.
Congratulations to the businesses for getting this far, and they deserve a lot of recognition and credit keeping employees going, doing what they can. They're really skilled to actually do that.
Cabinet will look at the alert level settings on Monday.
It's 6:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Iwi leaders in Tairawhiti Gisborne want assurances from the government that their region will be protected from COVID-19. The threat of COVID is heightened in the country's region, with most youth and the highest percentage of Māori. Yesterday, one iwi leader asked Associate Minister of Māori Health, Peri Hinare, if he could speak to Cabinet about putting up borders. Our Tairawhiti reporter Tom Kitchen has more.
Turanga Health CEO Rewete Ropia says in Tairawhiti, to manage the COVID-19 threat, they're following a simple premise.
Many methods connecting with whānau, whatever day, whatever time.
The Gisborne-based primary health organisation is owned by the 3 Gisborne iwi, Rongo Whakata, Nai Tā Manuhiri and Te Aitanga Amahaki. Associate Minister of Health Peri Hinare was in Gisborne yesterday. He says he was asked by iwi leaders to block the entrances to Gisborne so the region could be safe.
That was what was mentioned to me on the marae when I was there yesterday, and I said that I'd talk to the police minister and my colleagues.
Ngāti Porou Chairman Selwyn Parata was the one that mentioned this in a whai kōrero on a paipai in a marae. He says they want to be involved.
Like Hone Harawira in the north, Tairawhiti we want to be involved in the thinking, planning and implementation of strategies to protect our borders from day one and not be brought in after the fact.
Police Minister Poto Williams says it's an operational matter for the police. Tairawhiti Peri Himana say they're working with local iwi to develop a plan to keep the community safe at all alert levels. This is based on an existing police-led community support model in Northland. The big concern is that regions like Tairawhiti aren't as well prepared as other parts of the country if a COVID outbreak hits the community. As National's Deputy Leader, Dr. Shane Arete, explains.
Our focus is on Auckland, as it should be, because it's got the greatest number of cases. But I'm really concerned if coronavirus spreads out to some of our more peripheral regions and the capacity of the intensive care units out of those regions.
For example, Tairawhiti has 6 ICU beds, while Auckland City has 94. In the weeks leading up to the outbreak, at some points the region's ICU was sitting around 80% full. But Huora Tairawhiti CEO Jim Green says plans are in place. They've got 3 new ventilators, now their total's at 7.
We got additional ventilators supplied as part of the national program to increase the ventilation capacity.
And more staff are getting involved.
We're also engaged in a program of upskilling other nurses so that they can take part in helping us out should that be necessary.
They'd split the ICU between COVID and non-COVID patients, and if it gets worse, have more plans.
If that's not enough, then we've got another area of the hospital that we would then turn over to managing people there as well.
Gisborne Mayor Riet Stoltz says there's one solution to avoid all of this: Super Saturday.
Please come out tomorrow, come and get your shot. If you're still hesitating, ask your health professional, ask someone that you trust, and we look forward to hosting you. We'll have barbecues, music. It will be a fabulous Tairāwhiti day, and we are going to roll out the sunshine as well.
There's about 11,000 people in Tairāwhiti that can still get their first dose.
The walk of a lifetime has come to a shuddering halt for trampers stuck in the Upper North Island's Alert Level 3 lockdowns. About 650 people are registered to walk the entire Te Araroa Trail, which runs the length of New Zealand from Cape Reinga to Bluff this season. The mammoth 3,000-kilometre route takes 4 to 5 months to complete. Overnight or backcountry tramping isn't permitted under Alert Level 3, and Te Tai Tukaro, Tamaki Makaurau and Waikato are set to be there until at least Monday. For dozens of walkers stuck on the road to nowhere, the only walking they're doing is to the local COVID swabbing station to get a test so they can jet out of lockdown. Jean Bale reports.
39-year-old writer Claire Nelson recently returned to Aotearoa from the UK. She's decided to take on Te Araroa as a way of reconnecting with her homeland. But so far, she's spent more days stuck in an ahipara campground in Te Tai Tukaro than she has taking in the sights.
We've all entered into it knowing that things can change and being prepared for the shift, and especially planning to kind of, maybe have to skip the Auckland region. But no one was prepared for a Northland lockdown, especially so soon into the walk, or we would never have, embarked when we did.
Claire Nelson is all the more frustrated by the circumstances of the Northland lockdown, where 2 COVID-positive cases used fake documents to travel to the region.
It's a real kick in the teeth, because obviously it's, someone who's deliberately breached the lockdown and they're not cooperating.
She's decided to fly home to Wellington before starting the walk again south of the Waikato border. While she wishes Te Araroa walkers were permitted to cross the border, she knows it's not realistic.
So as much as it would be nice to have an exemption for walkers, because I really do think we pose such a minimal risk, and everyone would be so happy to do any testing and even walk with masks or whatever it took to be able to just get out there and be out in nature and do it away from civilization. I do understand that logistically that might be a really difficult thing to impose.
Ototahi's Victoria Bruce quit her job to tackle the trail with her 7-year-old daughter Emily. The duo have reluctantly decided to kiss the Upper North Island goodbye by flying to Wellington, then restarting the trail in Taumaranui near the Waikato boundary.
It's very hard when it's a waiting game and you just don't know whether do you wait 5 more days and it will be lifted, or do you wait 5 more days and, COVID spreads further and there's more restrictions and possibly even harder to get out of Northland.
Te Araroa Trust Executive Director Mark Witherall estimates up to 200 walkers are affected by the lockdowns. He says some walkers have been planning their mission for years.
And a lot of them, resigned from jobs with the intention to take 4 or 5 months to walk the country and reassess their life. Yeah, I think they're just frustrated, like everybody, not knowing what and when. But again, I think we all can probably know what that feels like.
Mark Witherall says walkers are urged to follow the alert level rules of the region they're in.
One of New Zealand's most scenic spots is also one of the most remote and vulnerable if it gets cut off. Piotahi, Milford Sound, is preparing for how it would cope if it was left stranded in a disaster. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown is in Piotahi and has the story.
They're calling it Milford Mahi. About 24 volunteers from the police, surf lifesaving, water rescue and other agencies are carrying out a series of exercises to improve their knowledge of the area and to hone their skills. But for those in the town, it's about picking up the knowledge necessary to survive the big one. Everyone in the southern half of the South Island is acutely aware of the possibility of a magnitude 8 earthquake on the Alpine Fault. Milford Emergency Response Team Controller Tony Woodham says the small isolated community needs to be prepared.
The Alpine Fault is expected to deliver a magnitude 8 plus event sometime, anytime within the next 49 years. Because it's so close to this community and because our Milford community could be 1,500 one day or 50 the next in the village, depending on tourism, we have to have a plan.
Over the next 24 hours, volunteers from across the south will be put to the test. The scenario is 7 days have passed since the big one, and people are missing around the sound. Mr Woodham says this mirrors the kind of situations the community may face. It's why pretty much everyone in the town is playing a role.
This community is known as a resilient, capable community. They are all involved either as victims or skippers or with use of boats. The commercial community have been outstanding, along with the helicopter companies. So it's all being done by private entities supporting the Milford Emergency Response Team.
Otago Coastal Police Search and Rescue Coordinator, Sergeant Nathan White, is leading the response team in the exercise. He says the benefit to those involved is priceless.
The remoteness of where we are is just part of the attraction of coming here to see what we can do and see what resources are here and what they might need for the future going forward. There's any number of incidents that could happen here with the amount of tourist boats that come in and out. Previously cruise ships, you've got the Milford Track, we've got AF8. How we make that work in such a remote, isolated environment will be challenging.
But the team is volunteering its time.
Throughout New Zealand, Search and Rescue has many organisations that we work with and many people that give up their time and dedication and commitment to a good cause, and all off their own bat. It's just amazing.
Tony Woodham says for the past 40 years, emergency response in Milford Sound has been on a shoestring budget, surviving thanks only to the goodwill of the community. But he says that needs to change, with so many potential risks, and especially once tourists return when the border opens.
Lots of thoughts on Mr Whippy. Someone's got in touch to say they found an article on the BBC that says the founder of Mr Whippy was really interested in King Henry VIII of England, so he chose Greensleeves because it was supposed to be connected to the king. Someone else says that they use it because there's no licensing payments, and I'm loving this one. Jilly sent it in, but other people have too, that they've got a friend who tells their kids when the music plays it means they've run out. Doug's got in touch to say Greensleeves is attuned to our dog's ear. Our English pointer boy would hear Mr Whippy as the van entered Wairawere Beach and sit patiently at a gate. A free ice cream was always his reward. We had to pay for ours, he says. Have a fantastic weekend. Back Monday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. I'm Catriona McLeod. The emergency allocation system for MIQ is being criticised for demanding unrealistic levels of evidence and approving very few cases in some categories. The nurses' organisation says the new agreement with DHBs addresses pay issues and makes progress towards safe staffing. Around 3,000 Cantabrians, shortchanged on the payouts for their quake-damaged homes, are a step closer to getting their money after the settlement of a class action. And Microsoft is shutting down the Chinese version of its professional networking site, LinkedIn. We'll have more in the news and weather at 7 o'clock.
Country Life this week meets some cows that are also guinea pigs.
All these cows, I don't consider them as cows, they're pets, so they're all my pets.
Helping to find new ways to make milk that are good for the planet. And we chat to a wool entrepreneur aiming to keep kids' toes toasty.
Better for the environment. Good for New Zealand.
More comfortable.
Yes, warm feet.
Country Life, Friday at 9 during nights and Saturday morning after the 7 o'clock news on RNZ National.
It's time now for Focus on Politics.
Kia ora, ko Katie Scotcher aho, ane te pūrongo tōrangapū mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. The government's at a